Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of July. So, I talked about how in June I only read 5 books, and that wasn't a whole lot, and I really hoped that I could read more. Well, in July I read 3, but what I did finish reading was really good. The first book that I finished in July was The Red Deal: Indigenous Action to Save Our Earth by the Red Nation. This is a book written by a group of Indigenous people that focuses on climate justice. It starts out by talking about the Green New Deal and why that doesn't go far enough. It's not going to kick in quick enough, and it really doesn't deal with the root of the issue, which is capitalism and the culture that capitalism has facilitated, basically. It talks about the need for Indigenous justice and Indigenous sovereignty and land back in order to actually have climate justice, in order to actually have a big enough impact that we could potentially save the planet from the trajectory that it's going on now. Part of the reason why my reading month was so terrible did have a lot to do with, like, I don't know if you'd call it existential dread, because it's not a question of, like, I don't know, like God or what happens when we die, but it was more like, you know, the ocean's on fire and no one gives a shit. Is there a word for that kind of dread? So this was all at once helpful and not helpful for that dread, because on one hand, this is a very viable solution. It's a solution that I think would actually comprehensively help the planet. I mean, the reason that it's being sucked dry is literally because of capitalism. I think that having read Braiding Sweetgrass was really great, because she really digs into the cultural and moral piece of this, and a lot of, like, critiques of capitalism and how a lot of Indigenous beliefs and Indigenous practices are very, they are the antithesis of capitalism in a lot of ways. So that, I think was really beneficial going into this. So on top of that piece that I was able to put together, they talk at length about how that's even connected to other issues. So they talk about incarceration, they talk about homophobia, education, healthcare, domestic violence, and they talk about how all of these issues are connected, and how like Indigenous justice, land back would benefit all of those things. A shift away from the kind of toxic capitalist culture that has been cultivated would be necessary in getting at the roots of a lot of those problems. So this is an excellent book. I definitely recommend it, especially if you're going through and looking at a lot of stuff on climate change and climate justice. So while editing this, I realized that I never really finished my thought. So on one hand, this is a really great solution. I think it would work. But on the other hand, thinking practically about it, particularly at how the people in power would react to this suggestion, that's pretty bleak. Most, if not all, of the people in power have a vested interest in a lot of the shit that is making global warming worse. They also have a vested interest in keeping the power structures pretty much unchanged. So it's depressing to think about the fact that the solution that would actually work is going to take so much effort to implement, if it does even get implemented. Since I filmed this, I've actually found out about something that's going on right now that kind of proves that point. Paraphrasing or borrowing words from stopline3.org, Line 3 is a pipeline expansion from Enbridge, which is a Canadian pipeline company that runs from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin. This pipeline company was responsible for the largest oil spill in the United States, and this proposed pipeline expansion will cross the Mississippi River multiple times. The Mississippi River dumps out into hundreds of other bodies of water in the United States. It also goes through treaty land, and since the beginning of the year, I didn't know about this until recently, but since the beginning of the year, water protectors have been trying to stop this pipeline expansion. So if you haven't already, definitely educate yourself on this. I've got links in the description to more information about Line 3 and water protectors that are on the ground, so you can look up more about this. You can contact your local representatives, contact the president, tell them about the human rights violation as well as the ecological issues that this would bring. There are also multiple endangered species at risk, so include stuff about that too. Contact the EPAs in those areas. I'll put links and shit in the description. I just got done talking about how most of these politicians have a vested interest in these damaging practices, so it's not that I think that they will change their mind out of the goodness of their heart, but I do think that if they feel like enough pressure is applied to them, that they'll do something so that they don't look ridiculous. I think that some of them care enough about their appearance that if it feels like they're under heat, they will at least do something. Hopefully something is more than an empty tweet. But like I said, I will also have links in the description, so you should be able to find places to donate to. If you're close enough and you're able, definitely they need more people on the front lines. That's at least what I've been seeing on TikTok recently. So, educate yourself. Try to do something if you can. And on top of all of this, if you check out the people who are on the front lines, you can also see how the police have been acting. And there's a lot to unpack from there, so far as who is paying them. They've already taken in people without actual cause, which is illegal. And judging by the literal war crimes committed against the water protectors of the Keystone Pipeline, it's all just very concerning. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say or how to wrap this up nicely, but here's the rest of my wrap up. So far as readathons go for our last month, this fit the Fckathon prompt of fuck colonialism. The next book that I finished last month was Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. Like the title would suggest, this takes a look at prisons. It talks about how prisons work. It goes over some statistics from the early 2000s. Even though those statistics aren't up to date, the problem on the whole has actually gotten worse if you compare those statistics to ones from 2019. In this book, the United States, I think they said, had 5% of the world's population and 20% of the prison population. Currently, we have just a little over 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prison population. So, this is more relevant than ever. She goes through the history of prisons, and specifically she looks at prison reform and how really the history of prisons has been the history of prison reform. What prisons looked like in 1921 are vastly different from how they look in 2021. And she talks about how the steps that people have taken, particularly under the guise of making the system better, have created what we have now. Mass incarceration, privatization of prisons, etc. And in framing it the way that she did, it really puts into perspective just how young our idea of prisons are. I think one of the biggest things that people have to say when confronted with the idea of prison abolition is, oh, that's too extreme. How would society function without a prison? But society functioned without prison before, and certainly there are ways to do it later that are even better than how some societies have run before. And that's kind of what she ends with, is the idea of envisioning a world without prisons and what that would need. It would have been kind of nice to see that part fleshed out, but a lot of other writers have hit on it, and honestly, this was supposed to be a short primer. It was extremely effective, and I highly recommend it. And this was also good for the Fckathon, for the prompt, Fuck the Police. And the final book that I finished in the month of July was The Ghosts We Keep by Mason Deaver. Huge mood shift, huge genre shift. This is a YA contemporary. Mason Deaver wrote I Wish You All the Best, which is, I think, the book that people point out when talking about non-binary owned voices books. The Ghost We Keep also focuses on a non-binary main character, Liam. In the beginning of this, their brother has died very suddenly in a car accident. And this book goes back and forth between after he's died and before he died. And you kind of get a little bit of his brother's story, and you get Liam grieving, as well as some of the people around him. This was such, I think, a realistic portrayal of grief. There was no, like, one really big character to lay back on who, like, really knew what they were doing. Because who actually knows what they're doing when someone dies? Especially a young person dying really suddenly. You know, even, like, parents and grandparents, like, they're not gonna have their shit together. And the way that Liam acts throughout the story, I think, is very honest. They're kind of combative at certain points. I feel like I could see some people saying that maybe they're, like, dramatic or something like that, because people don't like to read a teen... Some people don't like to read a teen book and find a messy, emotional teenager. But that's literally people. People are messy. People are emotional. And if they're going through something really traumatic, why would they act rationally? That would be so weird. Like Catcher in the Rye, I think, is the biggest example of that. People are like, oh, he's so whiny. This is so stupid. His brother just died. There's evidence that some really traumatic stuff happens at the beginning of that book, too. Like, why on earth would he not be completely insufferable? That would be weird, to be totally well-adjusted after something like that. All that is to say, this was a very honest portrayal. I cried my entire way through it. You know, dealing with grief, especially in such a raw, realistic way. You know, anyone who's had any sort of significant loss in their life is probably also going to ruminate a little bit. But it was excellent. I highly recommend it. Mason Deaver is incredible. So go read it. So, those are the books that I finished. I did start or work on a couple of things too. I talked about wanting to read Gender Trouble with a group of people on Instagram. A lot of them read through Gender Trouble. I got to page 5, which, to be fair, there are 2 prefaces that make up 27 pages, so it says I'm on page 5, but I really read over 30 pages, so it's not as bad as it sounds. I do want to read it at some point, but who knows when. Brain Machine's broke, so we'll see. I also worked some on An Unkindess of Ghosts. I'm still mostly reading this on audiobook. It's still really great. River Solomon is a genius. I just haven't finished it yet. And finally, I started Basic Principles of Marxism-Leninism, a primer by Jose Maria Sison. Sison founded the Communist Party in the Philippines, and he wrote this primer from his jail cell in the early 80s. This was one of the books that I got in my FLP haul, that I have in one of my poetry month vlogs, I think. I mean, it's good so far. It's breaking down, thus far, it's broken down dialectical materialism and historical materialism, how they're related, giving concrete examples. It's good stuff so far. I don't think I worked on anything else. If I did, it was only a page or two, and it since exited my brain. So that was July. If anyone's read any of these books, definitely let me know what you thought about them in the comments. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.